Welcome to the Diary of Discovery, the podcast where we delve deep into the human experience of healing and transformation. I'm your host, Jacky Clark, and each week we will sit down with inspiring individuals who have embarked on their own personal journeys of healing and self-discovery. From overcoming trauma to navigating life's challenges, our guests share their raw and honest stories, offering insights, wisdom, and hope to all who tune in. So grab your favorite cup of tea, find a cozy spot, and join us as we uncover the power of resilience, courage, and the pursuit of authenticity. This is the Diary of Discovery. Welcome back to the podcast. I'm so excited. Today we are joined by the wonderful India, and she's going to tell us all about her healing journey. So, India, please introduce yourself.
Hello, thank you for having me. I'm very excited to be on your podcast. My name's India Adams. I am a women's coach and I specialise in dancing, really. Dance therapy, movement to music, but yeah, dancing.
Oh my gosh, I love it. So, for anybody who knows anything about my background, I danced from the age of 2, literally all the way up until I left South Africa when I was 19. So, me and India are like little kindred spirits, and India didn't even know that I danced. So, she's just finding this news out right now, which is super exciting. But I am so excited for this episode. Like, I cannot wait to dive into this. So, India, let's start at the beginning of your journey and like what actually led you to your healing moment in the kind of process.
Yes. I think what led me to my very beginnings of my healing moment was that I'd become a mother. I think by that stage I had two young children and I just wanted to find something for myself. But also, I remember actually Googling how to have more patience because I found the transition to motherhood like quite a shock. It was, I say to my eldest son, who was 9, he'll often say, on Mother's Day, he's like, you should buy me a gift, really, because you always say that I made you, ma'am, because he made me a mother as much as he was my child. So I felt like there was this huge rebirth, and it was really a transition. So 2 children in, I'd completely been kind of lost in motherhood, and I felt very invisible. And um, yeah, there's a lot of other things to discuss, I think, around the lack of support, I think, around for new mothers, or there was for me at the time, particularly just completely sucked into this like absolute black hole of, oh, right. So the beginning was I tried, I think it was a little meditation class, which was great, but it was absolutely still. It was lying down for like an hour and a half. I was so still that like my bum cheeks used to go numb. Um, but it was lovely, and it did start to open some things up, but it just wasn't the right thing exactly. And then I found out through my sister-in-law that a very dear friend of mine, who I knew from being very young, who was also a singer and a dancer, she had started doing something called Kundalini yoga, which I'd never heard of. But the thing was, I wasn't really into yoga, but she said, "Oh, we do singing." I was like, you do what? You do singing? What? This sounds amazing. A yoga class with singing. So I went along, and to be honest, I don't feel like I started the healing journey. The healing journey kind of started me because we started to sing mantra, and I couldn't stop crying. I mean, like it wasn't even. I mean, it was embarrassing. I felt not that I was really a person who was ashamed to cry, but I hadn't thought of it. I had never thought of me past. I'd never thought of anything that would come up. It was just like, I need some time. I need to get more patience. Let's do this. So we started singing these mantras, and I think for anyone who hasn't heard them, I would hope that maybe we could put a link or something in the description of the podcast, because I've got like a couple in particular that were just, I feel like my heart just absolutely burst. It burst open, and it started to crack. Basically, that was the beginning of it. I feel a little bit like tearful just saying it, but I think so. What the beginning of that was is, so going right back to the beginning. So I had a huge moment of grief and a huge tear in my heart when I was 15, when my dad died. So my dad died like very suddenly in a very quite traumatic circumstances, and it was a huge shock, and I was so young that I just don't think, like, even looking back now, I think, God, did I not deal with it that well, or did I intentionally kind of not? But I think when you're that age, I was 15 years old, I think actually on some levels you just absolutely can't. You just can't. It felt like at that age, it felt like if I allowed it, it was a tsunami, and we all know what tsunamis do. It wasn't like a wave of grief; it was a tsunami. So I think I did the right thing in I think what I decided to do at that young age was to absolutely block certain parts of my heart off. That's what it felt like. I don't think it was like an instant decision. I think I think at that young age as well, when you're 15 or 16, anyone who can remember being that age or who has a child that age, also you're starting to want to maybe explore romantic relationships. And I did when I was like 17, and I had unfortunately a couple of really awful experiences, probably because I was so vulnerable. And when I felt that sadness and grief about the relationships, it just triggered the tsunami feeling again. So I think looking back, I really decided it's sort of how I describe it is like the deepest and most tender parts of my heart just became very calcified. So it wasn't like I intentionally locked them behind. It just it did it to protect itself. Um, so I think what I realized uh, through, there were other key moments that I can talk about, but I realized that because you have a question about key realizations, sadly, there was no denying once I started to unlock this grief. I had made most of my decisions about my relationships based on being an absolutely terrified 15-year-old girl. And
Mm.
I was starting to grow so much and feel so much of my grief that the biggest revelation for me was I am not in the right relationship anymore. I was married, and I now by this point had 3 children, and I had chosen that relationship based on um needing to feel safe, and that needing to feel safe came with other boundaries and restrictions that were keeping me very, very small. So I described that relationship like a golden cage. So I was very, very happy to step into that golden cage when I was a young woman, a frightened 15-year-old inside, but like in my early 20s, which is when I started the relationship. Um, and the cage got smaller and smaller and smaller and smaller and smaller. And then I had this ambition to spread the wings, and it wasn't fitting anymore. So I had to inevitably kind of leave that relationship with 3 young children as well. And after that, and after I navigated that, everything else came into alignment. But that was the absolutely huge, because when I got married, for some reason, because I knew divorce existed and I knew separation existed, and even with children. And I wasn't particularly conservative or traditionalist, but I had taken those vows so seriously that I thought I had to stick it out no matter what. But it was just becoming so clear that I needed to grow in ways that this relationship could not sustain any longer, because I wasn't the same person. So it is a little bit like a freight train, isn't it? Once you get on the healing path, you're like, this is unstoppable now. And it all has to break down before it can start the rebuild.
I love that idea of that freight train. Like it's such a it's such a great image of that movement. And I think it does, like when you're saying about that golden cage, like I think a lot of people cage themselves into these situations and relationships and beliefs and thoughts and like all of these things. And I think that the cage never actually changes. It's us that changes. We get bigger and bigger and bigger to the point where that cage is then really suffocating. Because I think, we, as you said, we walk into that cage completely willingly. Nobody's put us there. We've said we're going to get into it. The other person has even potentially been very clear about what the cage looks like. And they said, this is what you're getting into. Like, it's not like we're necessarily walking in blind and then being like, oh, wait, this was not what I was expecting. So I think like it's like a really interesting concept, isn't it? And then once you start that healing journey, there's a lot of people call it an awakening, or that like heart crack, like that really kind of big moment where everything you believe kind of looks different. And I think like I'd love to kind of get your perspective on that. Like, what was the biggest change in your outlook to life, like in that moment where everything kind of shifted for you? Like, what did you like no longer believe was true or believe was true in that shift?
Yeah, I think another really so I remember that when I sang the mantra, I felt like my heart cracked open and I couldn't stop the tears. And then there was another moment when I was on a women's retreat with our very dear friend Alice, Alice Allam, who had this beautiful sisterhood retreat, and it was an autumn equinox, and it was the first time I'd taken a full day away from my children, and I was very, very busy, 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 busy. I'd never stopped and was stopped, and we did two things. We did like a inner child healing, and we did she did a lovely exercise with a piece of chocolate where you have to put it in your mouth and eat it slowly. And I just found that so irritating, so annoying. Like, what is going on? Why is everything so slow? I was just like, never stop, never stop, never stop. So I was forced to stop, slow down, experience this pleasure, which I found like so difficult for a start. I remember Alice being like, and if you're finding it difficult to enjoy the pleasure, you might want to think about it. And I'm like, oh God, why do I have to do this? Like, this is yet another thing. And hadn't actually left my marriage yet at that point. But the most powerful thing was we did this inner child thing. And actually, one of my other friends was there facilitating the event. So she wasn't doing the meditation. And I just, again, the tears, the tears, the tears. She said, I saw you and I felt like something left your body. Something actually left your body. But I think what it was for me was when I'd had some little bits and bobs of like counseling and chats with people and things before, and they would say, what was your childhood like? And I'd say, it was amazing, it was beautiful, blah, blah. Did anything significant happen? Any trauma? No, nothing. It was brilliant. And they're like, nothing? And I'm like, no, nothing. Okay, great. Well, tell us about your parents. Oh, yeah, I lost my dad when I was 15. 15? So you were a child? I'm like, oh, God, shit, yeah. I was a child. So in my head at that age, because at that age, you don't want to be a child. You don't think, I certainly didn't. And also, like, when I think about, like, see, my mum's upbringing, my mother, she was very much like an independent young woman from the age of about 13, like, just because of the generational thing. So I very much thought I was a person out in the world, and it took me until I was a mother to realize I was a child. For a start, that was a huge thing. This happened when you were a child. Your brain was still rewiring. So my brain was rewired in grief, and my brain was telling me, "You're not safe." This I didn't feel safe. I needed the cage. It's not about anyone else's cage, and you like you say, I absolutely went out looking for that, consciously or subconsciously. So the big thing for me was giving myself the understanding that this is like sitting with a child. This is sitting with a 15-year-old feeling so scared, so vulnerable. And I think the thing is for me, it was only becoming a mother, which I had to do. Like, we know, me and you know, everything happens for a reason. You have to trust and trust and trust. And what I got out of my marriage was three children who absolutely saved my life on every level, but literally, physically, metaphorically, spiritually, every single level. So I think it was the realization, wow, I love these children so much. And also, I was a child, and I could only just start to love myself and love that inner child once I felt that motherly love. Like, I could only mother myself. So that's how I think my outlook changed, was seeing that it wasn't like, because I've thought to myself, why couldn't I grieve? Like, and beat yourself up for being avoidant, or, it's like you couldn't have. I think as well, I realized when you lose a parent, when you're a child and you lose a parent, in reality, you lose both parents, because the
Mm.
other parent loses themselves for a while. Mine certainly did, and me and my mum discussed it. She lost herself to grief, but not only did they lose themselves to grief, once they come out of the initial stages of grief, then they have to like rediscover who they are. And I was 15, 16. So really, I'm becoming a young, and by the time my mum's like grieved and blinked and turned around, I'm 18, I'm an adult. I'm going off to uni in Edinburgh. I'm doing all the things I was doing. And that train left the station. There's no chance now to grow together as such, because you're two women now doing. So it was all a lot. It was all like, I think they say trauma is too much, too fast, like too soon, and that's what it was. And it was only when my heart started to crack open through mantra really. It wasn't really the yoga, it was the mantra and the movement. You do like the movement, don't you? So I know we'll come on to this, but it was movement for me. But I think because I'm a dancer, and one of the grieving stages I had to go through as an adult was like my dad was a big part of my dance journey. He was one of the only dads that used to come to the competitions. Oh my goodness, he used to get so involved and he was so competitive, but it was amazing. It was lush. Like there'd be no other dads. And I think when I lost my dad, I just found it too painful to go back. There was too, it was just I just couldn't do it. So as you know, like when you're out of dancing at that age for a while, 2 or 3 years, it's quite difficult to get back in. And I always knew I was going to have a career as a professional dancer. Everybody did, and if I do say so myself, I was very very talented and had so much potential as a 15-year-old girl. I could have made it on any stage I wanted to, but I think I just couldn't bear it. So there was also a lot of grieving I had to do as an adult around the lack of the lost opportunity, the grieving, and I actually ended up after that retreat with Alice, I ended up going back to my old dance school, to my old dance teacher, and having lessons again. And at the time, I thought it was because I wanted to get qualified as a trainee teacher, but it wasn't. I needed to be back in the room with that woman because my old dance teacher, Suzanne, she went through that with me, that grief. And obviously, she had a bit of grief herself because she knew my family and my dad, and also she grieved for this young dancer that she thought was gonna. My claim to fame is that I was our first champion because she set up her dance school and I was one of our first students. She was just young, she was 20 or something, and I was one of our first champions. So I was going to be her first young woman on the stage, in the West End or whatever. And it didn't happen, and there was a huge separation, grief, sadness that I had to have the power and the strength to feel. And that was like 2019 was when I started to realize, oh my God, I've got to do this. Like I've actually got to feel all these feelings, and everything fell apart. Everything, all the decisions I'd made, apart from my children, and they were the ones that really saved me and are still the absolute driving force for everything that I do.
Oh, I love that so much. I think it's so incredible to be able to look at like that one situation of you losing your father and then how that impacted so many other things and like rewrote the future that you then lived and rewrote the career path that you went down and the relationships that you had and then like also even just the knock-on effect of the community around like and how one thing can make such a big kind of like shift in the forces, but all for good reason. Like as you said, like we know that everything kind of leads you to the place that you're supposed to be. And looking at you now and the woman you are and the things that you're planning on building and like the incredible relationship that you're in and the children that you have and like all of the things that just like are aligned now, like it's like actually there was a point to all of this and you kind of like come out the other end, which I think is so incredible. But obviously it's never just oh, you decided in 2019 to heal and then suddenly everything was done. Like it would be great if it was. So what did that journey look like?
I think, yeah, like you said, one of your questions is like, what's next? And it's like, well, this is where actually I feel like the real exciting work starts, because that work or whatever it was that started in 2019 was an absolute crumble, and everything fell away. Those huge amounts of realizations. I mean, these are huge life decisions because when we separated, me and my ex-husband, my youngest child was only 1. And so you might think that was the most difficult thing, but it wasn't. It felt liberating, and I felt the first summer that we were separated, I felt joyful. I felt like the bird out of the cage, and I was like stretching my wings, and I think it's a lot of people who I didn't know very well, and but who were acquaintances would always be like, "I'm so sorry, like I'm so sorry for your loss," and I'm like, "It's all right, it's all good." So I just felt like, yes, I'm finally free, but um, obviously, I think after some time of lone parenting, basically 3 very young children, and having to hold everything else together, that was when it really hit. It's just the exhaustion the physical exhaustion and the emotional exhaustion and figuring it out, putting the children first. But I knew it was necessary. I knew that I had to do that. So I think that, well, like one of the most difficult parts for me was it was in the we'd separated and it was Christmas time and I got a really awful virus because as women I think sometimes no matter what we're going through we can just keep going. So I'd never had a day off work. I'm not proud of it now. I'm like I should have probably taken some time, but until that point I had never had a day off work, never phoned in sick. I don't think anyone at work knew what was going on. I never shared it. I just wanted to kind of keep going. But this virus, whatever it was, really took us down, and I was forced into bed. Like I was in bed for about a week. I had to go and stay at my mum's, and I had to call my ex-husband, and he took the kids to his mum and dad's for a few days. And I was really gutted because it was the first Christmas we'd been separated, and I'd done so much to make sure the kids had like an extra special Christmas because mum and dad weren't in the same house together, and it all just fell apart. I couldn't go to any of the pantomimes or any of the ice skating or any of the things, and and the physical illness just took us to bed, and I had to then just feel all of the grief of all of that, and all of the guilt, and all of the shame, and all of the judgment, and all of the things I had to feel, and that was my darkest hour. That was I think one of your questions was there a time you didn't think you were going to make it? And I honestly didn't think I could make it because um all of my coping mechanisms have been taken away. So like as we'll probably discuss, my coping mechanism is music, movement, dancing. I was just wiped out for about 3 weeks. And then what followed that was an intense period of um I don't know what you would call it, depression or um my friend has a nice little saying like when you're depressed you need deep rest. And I did then take a big chunk of time off me day job. So I had like 6 months and work were fantastic, but I did. So that was going into the new year. But I remember the illness had really forced us to think about what I wanted. And my ex-husband had already moved on and was in a relationship. And I remember what I felt about that was huge relief because I was so worried about him.
Mm,
Because I instigated the separation and he totally agreed. But when you instigate something, you always wonder, is that person going to be okay? But what it did was it gave me permission to admit that I wanted something as well. I wanted something. Would being in our marriage had been sort of like it hadn't been working for a while. So people will often say, "Oh, they've moved on quickly," but actually, it's not. It's like we'd kind of energetically separated, some years previously. But when you have children, it's not as straightforward as that.
mm,
So after that Christmas of being so unwell, it was like New Year's a little bit before New Year's, and I wrote a list to the universe about a dream relationship. I literally wrote out every single thing, and all I knew that this man was going to have a huge heart. So I just thought, that's the number one, universe, please. Like, I just need a man with this huge heart. And then I listed everything else as well. And then New Year's Day, I was invited out with some friends, and that's when I met my current partner. Well, we'd known each other since school, so I'd known him for 28 years, but we're connected. We're connected on New Year's Day, and there was just no going back. And he was everything and more on that list. And I think what I said to him was, "Can you come back in a year?
mm,
I need to do more healing." I'm a 15 year, like I didn't actually say I'm a 15-year-old scared little girl, but I knew enough by
mm,
that time to know about like attachments. And I said, I have a really intense anxious attachment. I'm going
mm.
to need this. I'm going to need this. And I was very clear from the beginning. And he was like, there's no way I'm ever going anywhere. I feel emotional talking about it, but he was like, and I said, okay, well, as long as you know where I'm at and I'm not at work and I'm recovering, is this the best place to start a relationship from? And he's like, I don't know, but I don't have a choice because this is it. This is like everything that I want. And so I think one thing I would say to people is, and I say this all the time in the healing and spiritual world, is there's a tendency to think you have to be completely whole or healed before you have relationships of any type, friendships, romances. But it's not, I don't think. And actually, I think we're relational creatures. So I do feel like we can. come together as long as you're honest and as long as you're not relying on that person to heal you. So there's a nice metaphor I like to think of where it's like we both come with baggage. Do we want to fall over each other's baggage and trip up and hurt each other? Or do we want to sit down and go, okay, this is a lot. Let's unpack it together. We're going to heal ourselves together. So it's that is what we have done. So me and my partner have done that and we've been together now 18 months and I would say I would call him a healer actually because he was always in the spiritual space anyway, and he's got like the biggest heart. Honestly, like he's an ocean, and I think told you before he's Pisces as well, so he's just a real feeler and he can feel everything. He's a real ocean, and we've done so much healing together as well, and I think this year has been the year where I've just been like. If toxic habits or patterns were whack-a-mole. I've just been like bam, bam, bam. Like there's just been so many things I've just completely changed and moved forward with for the better. And it's because I feel now I'm supported and the anxious attachment, I've the most secure I've ever felt in my life. But I think that's because the thing I think has been key to it, and I'd never realized before, because when you start your healing journey, you come across like so many cliches, and I am a little bit like Wednesday Adams, like the original Wednesday Adams. I know I'm an Adams, India Adams, but one day, only one day, but I'm like the original Wednesday. Really, I am quite like, oh God, it makes us sick. Like I don't want to be. I'm not all rainbows and hearts and love and flowers. Sorry. I get angry and frustrated and I get bored and I'm like eye rolling all, oh God. But one of the things that is 100% true is people talk a lot about self-love. And I have to just say, if there's one thing, please don't rule out as being the cheesy cliche. It comes back to like, love yourself. That is the only way to be secure. Nothing can knock you when you love yourself. And I think I just couldn't do that before and I've worked so much on it. And once I started to love myself, all of these toxic patterns, habits, it just started to fall away like leaves on an autumn tree. And then the new buds just start to grow. And then all of a sudden I'm blossoming, I'm blooming, and I'm being more myself than I've ever been. I'm being seen everywhere. I'm like things are happening. I'm meeting people, and everything I ever dreamed of is now growing on a tree of life compared to like just burying and hiding away and relying on outside forces or even relying on stepping into a cage or whatever it is. It just smashed everything, just bam, gone. And it's all through self-love. But I do believe that like good and healthy relationships are key to that, and that you can really be supported by that. You don't have to be an island. In fact, that's one of the things I would say is like I was so terrified of all relationships really. Like even once with my own family in the end. I didn't want I couldn't have conflict. I was just too terrified of everything and too terrified of I couldn't feel my own heart. I didn't have enough love for myself. I just didn't. So in the end what you become is just so small and hidden and invisible and alone.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. I think like there are so many cliches around healing. There are so many things that people are just like, oh my gosh, like that, that can't be the case, or, that can't be true. And some of them are absolutely not true. And some of them, there are some things that people say that I look at and I go, don't believe that, because that's like definitely not. But I am absolutely with you on this idea of self-love, because the more that you love yourself, the less that you need to rely on other people to fill gaps for you, the less that you need to look outside of yourself for things to make you feel secure, make you feel happy, make you feel whole, like make you feel all of these things. And I found like going on this journey, healing, like the same thing, like building self-love, like my boundaries are so much better, the standards I have for my life are so much better, like everything becomes so different. And when you have different standards, your beliefs just naturally change to suit those standards. Like it's just such a normal thing to happen. And I think that that is so important as people go on this healing journey. In You're not able to heal and feel your emotions and like do any of this work if you cannot find love and compassion for yourself. Because a lot of the time, and you've mentioned a couple of these emotions already, like a lot of the time you have to move through that grief, that fear, that loss, that rage. Like there's such big emotions. And if you've been hiding from those emotions and that idea of like that tsunami that kind of like, it could wash you away, like I always feel like, especially now, because my metaphor when I was going through healing was the idea of like I always felt like I was standing on the edge of like this like tiny little ledge, and there was just like darkness in front of me. And if I stepped off, like it was just going to be too much and I was never going to be able to get out of it. Like it was just going to be all consuming. And it was so interesting because when I started to do this work of compassion, of love, of realizing that I am enough in myself, I was able to metaphorically step off that ledge and realize that I am the light. Like I am the thing that makes that space light, but I would never have been able to step off that ledge. And like with your tsunami idea, like I just kept on thinking like, like that self-love is like the anchor. Like you are the thing that holds yourself together, like regardless of everything else. But you have to learn how. You have to learn how to hold yourself together. You can't just step into the tsunami on day one and be like, let's go. You have to learn how to hold yourself together. And like then once you've got all of those grounds, like if something similar happened now, you would have so much more capability to be able to love yourself through it. And like, things never seem as big or as bad or as scary the more that you've gone through this healing journey because you know who you are and you know how you exist in the world and what value you bring. And like there's this whole different way of it all kind of making sense, which I think is so incredible as you go on this healing journey. And I definitely want to talk about dance. Like, I definitely want to talk about how that helped your healing journey, like what you've done with it. Like, what does that look like for you over this period?
Well, so when I decided not to go back to dancing when I was that little 15-year-old girl, I didn't really properly dance again until, oh, about 13, 14 years, literally. Literally. So the only time I would ever dance would be when I would go out with friends to a bar and dance and probably had a drink and dance. So as I found a Zumba class when I had my second child, and I just thought I really want to move my body and I want to dance. And I found this Zumba class and it was absolutely fantastic. And it was on a Saturday morning at my local leisure centre. And it brought me back to life again. And I would stand at the back of the class and I would hide, and nobody would have ever thought I was a dancer. I had no confidence at all. Um, I didn't love myself at all, didn't love the body I was in, I didn't like anything that was going on, but I loved the music. So I kept going and kept going and kept going. And then one day the teacher said, I'm moving to Australia. And I was like, oh my God. Ooh. And she was like, we're looking for a new instructor. So I just thought, oh, you know what? I got in touch with the company. I'd never taught Zumba. I'd never taught adult dance fitness. I hadn't danced since I was 15 years old. By this stage, I'm what, like mid 30s. Um, and I got the job and I started teaching again. And it was for me, everyone's different, but for me, moving my body is absolutely essential. There's something about dancing, and the thing that I loved about Zumba was it's very like it's quite tribal in the sense of the drums and the beat. It's very Latin, it's very hips based, which now I know it's so essential for women to move their hips. My hips were so locked, my jaw was locked. I remember I actually got lockjaw in my second pregnancy and I had to have a little, like a little mouth guard. And it all started to just ease up and I was moving my body and I was just that in some ways it was that Zumba class was the same time as I found Kundalini yoga. So the two powerhouses of dance and mantra came together. Yes, it was in a very conventional form still, a fitness class, and I didn't know what was going on at all. But I thought there's something going on here. There's something going on. So that was good and it was all great, but this is like 2019, so then lockdown happens and I had my third child in lockdown, so in many ways everything stopped, so I couldn't get my classes or anything like that, but I did go online. I did do my classes online, Zumba, And then when I came out of lockdown, I was desperate for community. I was just so like, right, I need to get out and in back in with my people. And the friends of ours had started a thing called ecstatic dance, which I don't know if any of your listeners may have heard of, if you've heard of. Conscious club and ecstatic dance, similar sort of concept, which is ideal for me because, like I said, I used to love going out dancing in clubs, clubbing and raving and things like that. You can't really do that when you've got like three very tiny children and you've got a curfew. So this was ideal. So I started going to these ecstatic dances. And the good thing about ecstatic dance, it's not in a leisure centre and you're not wearing like gym gear. I used to get dressed up. And that is the first time I let myself be seen. And I mean, I used to long red silk dress, full face of makeup, glitter, hair. And I remember someone come up to me and go, "Oh my," it was another woman, "You are so sexy." And I was like so embarrassed because I was just like, I've been seen being sexy. Like, bearing in mind, this is mostly like other women. And it's just like dancing free. It's free dancing. There's no steps to follow. And the music's fantastic. I could put the link into some things if people are interested. But I
Yes.
started to be like, that was the next level of movement for me. That I was like, this is unstructured, this is free, this is just like moving. And I was incorporating all the things I knew about yoga and moving your body. And then that was the absolute next level for me of like, this is what I need to be. This is where my business is going. And so I had like all the knowledge of Kundalini I'd been doing for years at this stage now. Excuse me, I'd obviously I still had the Zumba and dance fitness going, which is still very passionate about because you're reaching people there. Like that was me. I was that new mom at the back of the class. That's people's first like in. It's the more conventional way of going, I'll join the gym, I'll go to a class. And then the next level for me was this conscious movement. And then I was starting to be invited to, I've got friends. So I met lots of people in the healing space. They were doing like beach fire, spring equinox, autumn equinox. I was leading fire dances. I was doing all of that sort of thing. And then obviously the separation and the divorce happened and I needed to just step back. And that was the right thing to do. I mean, I was still moving and I had a daily practice. When I say a daily practice, though, I think sometimes that sounds too ominous. It just means dancing in the kitchen with the music on, like just dance, move. And don't get me wrong, like I felt absolute rage and anger. Um, really all of the ugly emotions and all of that kind of, things that we're told as women that are ugly and they're there
Mhm.
for a reason as well. And that's something I'm really passionate about. Like all of the labels that are put on us that we fear most are there for a reason and it's control and it's to keep us in our place. So, like I've thought that the worst things that a woman can be called are like a bitch or, a slut or fat or ugly or old. And that's all because you might not be able to keep that in. Those words, because those words mean you might have boundaries or mean you might be connected to your sexuality or might mean that you're not restricting food and you're not literally tired and drained or you're not wearing a corset or you're not wearing tight. It's all there. Those words that we're afraid of as women are all there just to keep us in our place. So I felt like I didn't just step out of the cage, I like smashed out of it with through movement. And then I reconnected to music. So one of the things that happened, I didn't realize when I decided I wasn't able to grieve as a young woman, as a teenager. As I remember saying to a friend, "Is it normal not to be able to listen to like loads of your favorite music?" And she's like, "What?" I'm like, "But I just cry and I can't cry because if I start crying, I'm just gonna cry and cry and cry." But what you don't realize is the list of music gets smaller and smaller and smaller until eventually all you can listen to is like soulless cheesy, pop, auto tune pop. And then I think it's true if what people say, if you can't feel your grief, you can't feel your joy. So the good thing, if anyone's listening to this at the beginning of their journey or who's grieving, I tell you what, like when you start feeling the darkest things, you start feeling the joy and the joyful. Like I was just bursting with joy and I was feeling happiness that I'd never felt before. And I was starting to feel me power and for me my dharma, the reason I was put on the earth is, apart from being a mother, is to move and to dance and music and movement. So like my mum always says I came out of the womb dancing and I think I was dancing before I could walk, when babies like you know it's just I've got the music inside of me, and I say sometimes like, I don't know if is it the music or is it dance? Like which one is it? Like I'm just so passionate, and I can't have music on around us without moving. Or I mean, sometimes I'm just moving and there's no music because I'm just like needing to like move. And I can't stay still too long. And if I do stay still too long, then things don't flow anymore. And I'm quite passionate about, I think a lot of people like me, when they think, how can I get more patience? And they Google it like me and they find meditation. That's great if it suits you, but it's still, and it's very, very inward. And I've since learned that that is quite a masculine practice in some ways. And for women, quite often what we need is to move and to flow and just, I don't know, like express. And we want to be seen. So I used to feel so ashamed about being at these dances. And the reason I was dressing up is because I never went out. I never had a night out. So actually, for me, I just thought, oh, it's a chance to put my nice dress on. But actually, I wanted to be seen. I wanted everyone to see me. So one of my mantras that I've got is, people say dance like nobody's watching, and I'm like, fucking dance like everybody is watching. Dance like your ancestors are watching. Dance like your grandmother who never had the chance. Like my grandmother didn't have the chance for many reasons. Dance like all of the women across the world today are not allowed to dance. Like dance like everyone's watching. So yeah, if
Mm.
you feel better just dancing like in your own space, close your eyes and pretend no one's there. But if you want to be seen, there's nothing as shameful about that. And I think it's because as well, like moving our hips has been made to be so sexual. Like if we're moving with hips, we must be inviting something. No, like our hips were designed to move. Like if you don't move your hips, you're going to end up with all sorts of physical pain. So we should be able to move our bodies in any way that we feel is good. And I feel damn good when I'm shaking my ass and hips. So that's what I do, like every day.
Oh my God, I love it so much. So I am also very much there's music on every day, dancing in the kitchen. And like it blows my mind when I find out that people don't do this. I'm like, how do you live your life? Like possible? Because it doesn't make any sense to me for people not wanting to move their body. Like I think it's there's such a therapy in it, like 100%, 100%. So, okay, let's give some advice. So, if somebody's just starting their journey, they are, just coming out of that grief or realizing that there's something that there's like trapped that they haven't dealt with, like, what would your suggestions be for sort of starting to feel your feelings and like get back into the world?
I think actually, and there's a lot about this these days, it is actually coming back to the body embodiment. So we're not two separate things, like, or three separate things, even mind, body, and soul. So for women in particular, when you feel something in your gut, it could be your heart, listen, listen and start to get curious about what that is. Trying not to push it down because it will pop up in mysterious ways. And there's absolutely no getting away from it. You can do it at your own pace though, because we've all been there where we've felt like, whoa, this is huge and I can't feel it right now. But I would say just try and check in with your body every day and try not to like override signals. So like one big thing for me has been and this is something I've had, a lifelong thing that I've had, and it's one of the lifelong like negative patterns that I'm breaking and have broken, is a very difficult relationship with food and my body. And I think that wasn't helped by dance culture because I was trained in ballet, hello, and all sorts of other different disciplines, but ballet being the one where there was a very, very specific type of body that was acceptable and body that wasn't. And while I was a teenager, I fit that body very well because I grew about 7 inches in a year. I was very tall and very slim and looked very elegant. And as soon as that growth slowed down, I became a woman, and it wasn't received well in the dance world. So my reaction was to shrink. Um,
Mm.
so for me, one of the things was I wasn't used to honoring like a physical hunger. I was used to ignoring bodily signals. So hunger, and then if you can't recognize when you're hungry, how can you recognize the whisper of intuition? How can you recognize the gut instinct? If you can't recognize my gut's hurting because I'm hungry or my gut's hurting because that person is not safe, like if for women, I think this is another way that our power has been like taken away. So I would just say like find a way, whatever way that is, of just sitting or whatever every day and checking in. what do I need today? How does my body feel? And it can
Mm,
be really simple. So it can just be like, I just feel like I need to stand up, put some music on and dance, or I
mm,
need to eat, or I need to have like 10 minutes of silence, or sometime sleep. Like I got to such a point of ignoring me grief and sadness and emotions. I was ignoring hunger,
mm.
tiredness, pain. Once you start ignoring one thing, it's a very slippery slope. And before you know it, you're not in your body. You're not feeling any feelings. You're numb and you're not in your body. And it's really not a good place to be. And I have been there as well. So, like, I'm feeling all the feelings and I'm very much still, like, working through that. But I'm very, very passionate um, about bringing the joy of movement and dance to everybody, but particularly women because that's the experience that I know best. So yeah, and I think obviously when you start to move, all sorts of things come up. But like I say, that word joy keeps coming up because it is so joyful. And honestly, like I'm quite a grumpy person, really, because I just don't mind anymore having a whinge or as in motherhood, we're often told another slur that women are often accused of is bad mother, and that can be literally anything. To be a bad mom, you can literally do anything. But one of the ways that you're a bad mom is if you complain about it's hard. It's really hard. But nobody says to someone who's decided to climb Mount Everest if they get to the top and say, "Whoa, that was hard." Nobody says, "Oh, stop complaining. You decided to climb the mountain." They go, "Yeah, it's hard because that was an amazing thing you've done." But if you're a mother and you complain about motherhood being hard, it's like, well, you chose to have children. So I am these days I'm a recovering people pleaser. So I'm just grumpy. I whinge about what I want to wear. I don't mind saying no. I don't mind not being liked and all of that sort of stuff. But one thing that I never regret is dancing. So if I go and teach a Zumba class, I can be so grumpy and have no sleep and be like, ugh. And I come out of the class and I'm like, everything's fine again. The rainbow's out and the sunshine and rainbow. So yes, we'll have to feel all our feelings and it can be heavy. But I really do feel like dance and music, it can lighten that heaviness and it can just bring so much joy. And it has for me, and it's put me on this. And I'm now in the right place. I'm now where I should be. And I'm starting something new. And I'm 40 this year. And I'm like, it's all good. I'm right where I need to be.
Oh, I love that so much. So what is next? What is the next level of healing for you? The next thing that you're focusing on?
I think for me, once I healed my relationship to myself, my relationship to everything changed. So this year, I've very much been continuing to heal my relationship with my body and with
Mhm.
food. I think the relationship with my body is the most exciting one because yeah, it's scary, and I do have those days I find difficult, but it's so liberating once you step into that. Yes, and like, I'm dressing myself differently because, as I said before, I've expanded in every way, in that physically too, and that's okay. I've made peace with that. Sometimes it's more difficult on certain days because the whole of the world and the whole of the media and everybody is saying that it's shrink, 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 and I'm like, no, expand, and like so, but that is quite fun. I've been really healing my relationship with money and working on my money story. So I would never have been able to say I love money, and now I can shout it from the roof. I love money because it's a tool like anything else. Why not? Um, the one thing I've done this year actually is I haven't had drank alcohol since this year because again, I think it was one of those things I would do because it was just completely not even thought about. Like it's just a thing you do. And once I started doing that thing, checking into my body, I just realized I hate this. It's horrible. I don't like it. It makes us feel unwell. So I've really loved the positive effects of that. So to be honest, it's changed everything. So it's been 6 months since I've drank alcohol. I haven't had any strange and unhelpful eating patterns for a long time, about a year or so. Obviously, I'm in quite a new relationship. So I'm in a relationship. And this is the other thing I want to just briefly touch on because there was a
Mhm.
point when I had this idea that I was a single mother of three. And anyone listening to this, if my family listen to this, they used to actually laugh and take the mick out of me because I was like, I'm a single mother of three. Who would want me? And I felt so sure that like, who's gonna wanna, have so much baggage and all of that. But like, it is possible, and there are amazing men out there who are way more than any list you could write, even if you write that list really, really well. And so we are navigating like a relation. We're quite, so it's 18 months in, so we're quite a new couple. So we're still in the honeymoon phase, but we've got these three amazingly bright lights that we're raising, these three beautiful children, and co-parenting and blended families. So there's a lot. It's a lot. And I have to say, so it's the next stage. It's like, how do I bring this to other women? So how do I put this together in a way that other women can access the healing power of dance and joy and movement and community and other women and people sharing their stories. And so I do actually feel like most of the shadow work, shall we say, is done for now. Though the depths of that brokenness has been reached, and there is only the phoenix now rising up from the ashes and spreading the wings. So it's not easy, don't get us wrong, but it is a rising feeling of power. And most days, I have to say, most days, even when I'm struggling, I do feel powerful because what's more powerful than accepting yourself and loving yourself and even when I look in the mirror and I don't like what I see, that's not even it. It's I am so much more than that. I'm more than my body, I'm more than my title, job title, whatever, I'm more than being a mother, I'm more than like all of that, like you said, I am the light, I am the power. I've got the power. It's like once you realize it, you're like, what? It was there all along, just needed to uncover it and yeah.
It's literally so exciting. Oh my gosh, I love that. You have absolutely everything that you need within you. Like, isn't that so incredible for people to know? And like, I remember back at the beginning of my journey, and as you said about yours, like, it definitely didn't feel like that at the beginning. Like, it definitely didn't feel like I had what I needed. It definitely didn't feel like I knew how to navigate or what I needed to do or what questions I needed to ask or what tools I needed to use. Like there was definitely not a knowing at the time. But I do think that, as you said, like if you're willing to sit and listen and trust your body has the answers. Like for me, when I was in my depression, the first thing that I started to do was run, and I had never been a runner before. I had always like I had not been like athletic in any way, shape, or form. I used to like skip school sports days every chance I got. So for me, this idea of like putting on running shoes and going running was just like so foreign. But
Did
it
you
just gave me
did you run
what was
with
that?
did you
So yeah, so I used to run either with music or with motivational speakers. Like, so I would listen to like motivational podcasts for like Les Brown, Gabby Bernstein, like people like that, Mel Robbins, etc. So it was like it was again like what I was pumping in while I was obviously moving my body, but there was again that like whole sense of something was within me that needed to come out, and it needed a way out. And like it was always hilarious because I would go out for 30 minutes, and like when I first used to go out I couldn't even do like a K in 30 minutes. Like I'd be dying and I wouldn't be able to move. And like now I run like 5Ks in 30 minutes, and I run half marathons, and I like do all of these things that uh, the person I was then like didn't even think was possible. Like I didn't even it just seemed so unbelievable. But I think like we have so much wisdom within us, and that movement of dancing, of just like getting out, moving your body, singing, like moving your vocal cords. Like there's so much in that to actually go out and try something new and put yourself in a position where you are letting yourself like feel like there's so much for people to take away from this, which is so, so incredible. I think we're gonna wrap it up there. Like we could probably talk forever. I think we're going to wrap it up there. It's been so wonderful to have you on the podcast. Thank you so much for sharing. And we will put links to like everything we've spoken about in the bottom of this episode because I want people to be able to just like have all of these like resources. And then obviously we'll also put a link to India's social pages so that you can go and get involved. And when she does decide that she's going to bring her dance to the world, I know that it's going to absolutely like change the lives of millions of women. So thank you so much for being such a bright, shining light, India. Like it's been incredible to have you.
Thank you so much for having me, and thank you for having this platform for women to share their stories.
Thank you for listening to another inspiring episode of The Diary of Discovery. If you found value in today's conversation, don't forget to subscribe to the podcast and share it with your friends, family, or anyone else you think might benefit from the stories of hope and transformation. Your feedback means the absolute world to us, so please take a moment to leave a review on your favorite podcast platform. Your reviews help us to reach even more listeners and continue to bring this meaningful content to the world. Until next time, remember, your healing journey is valid. You are never alone, and you have the strength to get through this. Keep shining bright, and we'll see you in the next episode of The Diary of Discovery.